Thank you and welcome everybody. It's great to see everyone here. So yes, I am Cassie Day. I run an organisation called The Carers Place, and we predominantly provide support coordination and specialist support coordination services here in South Australia. We do it a little bit differently, and we'll get to that in a little minute. The reason that I started my business is I actually wanted to create a business and a service that I would have wanted to have accessed myself had we had the opportunity. My son Matthew, he's now 19, he is an NDIS participant and he has complex health needs, and when he transitioned onto the NDIS many years ago, I had absolutely no idea what the NDIS was, how it could help us, and I was completely overwhelmed and confused. And so that led to 2 years of actually not utilising his plan at all. And I made it my mission to actually immerse myself in the NDIS space, understand what it is, how it works, and how it can really support people in a really valuable way, getting away from traditional boxed in kinds of services. And so my organisation is always on the lookout for people and businesses who are dynamic and who are innovative and can support people in a really out of the box way, meet them where they're at and help them, I guess, walk alongside them on their journey to getting towards living the life that they choose and reaching their goals. So it's less about, we look less about, you know, all of the technical things, but really about who you are, what your purpose is and your vision. So that's what we're super passionate about. There's some of the things that I want to talk to you about today. And of course, all of the boring stuff, you know, the compliance and all of the things that you need to really be aware of before you actually start stepping in and operating as a business within the NDIS. I didn't have those things, so I kind of learned from the school of hard knocks. So I really feel like it's my purpose to share that sort of process and those sorts of things with you, so you don't have to do it quite so tough. Okay.
So do you want to bring up your slides? And I know that Cassie's very open to, you know, sharing these slides with people, and if you've got any follow-up that you want to kind of email Cass about, I put a link to the Carers Place. There's a beautiful photo of Cassie and her son there on the website, so you might want to check that out too.
Okay, so I'm going to try very hard to keep my eye on the chat, which is over this way. So do pop your questions in there. Wendy will obviously keep a closer eye on those and interrupt me if I'm going too quick. But yeah, do ask any questions in the chat box. That's going to be the easiest way, and we'll have some time for questions at the end as well. Okay. So my intention here was to have a nice, quick, sharp, brief webinar, not drag it on too long, and I've got lots of content. So some parts of the content I will kind of rush through, and others will have a more in-depth conversation. What I will say now is that you will get a copy of all the slides, you will get a copy of the video, and you will get a copy, a live copy of all of the links that I share and resources that I share within this presentation. So we're going to cover really the role and intent of the NDIS. I think it's really important that you understand that if you're considering a business within this space. Some of the business considerations, and this is probably the largest chunk of this presentation. So everything from purpose and visibility, key people and key organisations that you need to know, pricing considerations, and of course compliance and obligations, and we'll go through some questions as well. Okay, so I do want to add a little disclaimer that this isn't direct advice to you as a business. This is general information that I have picked up along the way and throughout the last 5 years of my journey as a growing business on the NDIS. Okay, so what is the NDIS? Well, it's the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I'm sure you're all aware of that. And it's there to provide an individualised support program and support for people with disability, their families and carers. It is generally for people who have a permanent and significant disability up to the age of 65. After 65, we're in the aged care space. However, if you are an NDIS participant or supporting an NDIS participant who is over 65, they may have had access prior to their 66th birthday, so that's perfectly okay. So I'm not going to go through all of these objectives today, but I want to, I guess, highlight a couple of key areas. So one of the key areas of the NDIS and their intent is around promoting the independence and participation in community for people who have a disability. Okay, and they do that through supporting people to set specific goals for them and provide funding by way of supports to help people get there. Okay, so I just want to highlight this to you now. Again, like I said, this will be in the links pack. However, I think it's really important straight up that you know that you can check out the NDIS booklets and fact sheets. What I will say is if you do or have hopped onto the NDIS before, onto the NDIS website, you'll find that it's an absolute rabbit warren. You know, you can lose yourself for literally for days and weeks and not quite actually know where you've gotten. So I'm going to try and consolidate all of that a little bit for you today. But your booklets and fact sheet, and if you have, you probably can't see this down here, but there's a section there for providers. Okay. So I thought we would start by looking at what makes up an NDIS plan first, and then we'll go from there. Let me know if you have familiarity at all with NDIS, if you've seen plans, or if you're actually brand new to this, I'd love to know. So the NDIS provide plans or packages for people who are participants on the NDIS, and you'll hear me talk a lot about participants, okay? So they're our clients, they're people who are on the NDIS, and they are very much referred to as participants of the NDIS. So it's very much a language heavy government model, such as, you know, other government organisations as well, so participants. And they have three main categories for funding. Okay, so we have a bucket here. I've put them in buckets if you like. So we've got a capacity building bucket, we have a capital bucket, and we have a core bucket. Now, there are some differences between these, and you'll notice a few different things. I'm going to start over here with capacity building. Okay, there are a lot of different categories within capacity building, and capacity building is very much focused on the development or building capacity in people. So we're not talking about day-to-day supports here. We are looking at potentially time-limited supports here that support people to build their knowledge, their skills, and understanding to be able to reach their goals. Not always is it that, but it's very much centered around that. So for instance, improved daily living, they have wonderful ways that that they name their categories, but improved daily living is very much focused on therapeutic support. So allied health practitioners could come under that bucket of money. So we're looking at like physiotherapy, we could look at occupational therapy, could be social workers. There's just a whole range of different supports under there. There could be nursing supports needed, and then you can also fit mentoring under there through individual skill development, and we can, you know, get into all the nitty-gritties, but I don't want to go too deep into it at the moment. There is improved health and well-being, which you've got some exercise physiology and dietitian through that area. Improved relationships is actually about behaviour supports there. So it's a very specialised bucket of, category there. And then down the bottom, we've got support coordination, which is what we do, which is really supporting people to understand their plan, navigate the scheme, build up their skills that they can in the future be able to implement their own plan, find their own providers and deal with points of crisis. So there's lots and lots of different areas there. You notice things about jobs and all of that. So one key thing about that bucket of money is that it is not flexible. And what I mean by that is each level here, each category will be funded individually and you cannot mix funds between them. Okay, so if there's some money in support coordination and money in improved daily living, that funding is not interchangeable. So once you've run out of that money, that's it. And that's really important as a provider for you to know when you're trying to negotiate services with your participants. We can come back to more of this and I'm happy to have an open discussion about that at the end if you like. We're going to come over to core. So core here is very much assistance with daily life. So it's about day-to-day supports. We're looking at everything from personal and individual care, support, getting out and about with assistance with community participation. This could also be accessing new supports or services that are in the community that, say, a person with a disability hasn't actually been afforded the opportunity to before. So we have all sorts of programs that are offered out and about through different organisations. It could be a day options kind of a program, or it could be a group program, say, there's lots of programs such as, you know, a Dungeons and Dragons, or, you know, an art therapy group that is mostly focused on connection, social connection for people. So the core supports is completely interchangeable. You've got consumables in there as well. And so consumables can be anything from, you know, you may need particular kinds of continence products. There may be feeding products that you need. They're things that you consume, okay? And they're generally under the $1,500 mark, okay, per item. And so that budget is flexible. And so what I mean by that is somebody might have $5,000 given to them for assistance with daily life, $2,000 in social and community, and $1,500 in consumables. But they might not have any need or requirement for consumables, but have a much higher need for assistance with social and community participation. So they can use the funding from the different buckets of money. Okay, so it's an overall bucket here. Whereas here, these are individualized categories. Does that make sense to everybody?
Hey, Cassie, I'm thinking that, yeah, I've got lots of comments and people are messaging directly, but also more broadly. So the capacity building is definitely an area where a lot of people are saying that they can potentially, you know, shape their services. And I think the other area is probably the assistance with social and community participation. A few people I know online do have specific products like in feeding, for example, or clothing or whatever around consumables. But I think that's probably, you know, until we have a look at capital, at the moment, people are probably figuring out what category around capacity building best fits. And it's really interesting, the point about it not being flexible or interchangeable. And then also the social and community participation would be probably like another key area where a lot of people can provide services and experiences and support.
Great. What I would recommend, if you want to look at something that's really quite easy to read and consume, if you Google, and I'll put the links up anyway, but Google NDIS booklet 3. And in that booklet, it has a really nice layout of what comes under each of these particular areas. Of course, every service that everyone provides is going to be different, and it could potentially feature under a multitude of different categories. And we're not going to be able to get into absolute specifics today, but I love to hear more about what people are wanting to offer, and how we might be able to make it work and fit within the NDIS space, because as we go on, we're going to talk about a bit of market research and gaps in the market later, and we are absolutely screaming out for some really innovative supports, particularly in those areas. So that's good. So respite, Mark, absolutely through core supports there. Now, parts of that could come under a capacity building, and we can talk about that. And that's the thing, your services could actually be that dynamic that they could mix and match between the two. So you might provide a respite, but provide the opportunity for skill development within that respite setting, you know, in a group or individualized as well. So there are a lot of different options that we can actually, you know, support you with here. Crisis accommodation, absolutely. So I'm going to keep going because we could get stuck on this forever, but I would love an open conversation at the end. So do write your questions down and we'll see how much we can get through. So capital is very much, you know, capital is money. It's very much about assistive technology and home modifications. So these are non-human provided supports, if you like. So when we're looking at assistive technology, we're looking at mobility aids, personal care and communication devices, potentially wheelchairs, it could be grab rails, it could be specifically modified devices or aids to support people to live as independently as possible. Okay, and that also includes vehicle modifications as well. And then we have home modifications. Now, both of these assistive technology and home modifications are very specialized categories. They're generally categories where they're quite complex and there's a lot of background information, a lot of assessments, a lot of work goes into being able to get somebody to the point of being able to access assistive technology or home modifications. And so you really do need to have specific skills and experience in these areas. Now, I'm more than happy to talk to people about that. I'm certainly not an expert, but this is where support coordination can come in really handy, is in helping people navigate through that space. Clearly, they're not, well, not necessarily clearly, they're not flexible. When you're given a bucket of money for a piece of equipment, it is specifically for that piece of equipment. There's a few little things, you know, anomalies there, but we're not going to go into that today. The other thing that I do want to just share is that there are no flexibility across the buckets, okay? So if we've got extra in here and we want more supports over here, we can't take from the core to fund capacity building, okay, and vice versa. Not at the moment.
Cassie, can I just ask about that? So that just highlights the point about how important the plan design is, in terms of looking at people's needs and then figuring out, okay, what are we kind of like shaping up around these three buckets? And the fact of, well, who might we be working with as providers? Because that might mean that somebody could be working with so many different diverse providers to get the full depth and breadth as what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just, I guess, highlights one of my passions is about us as providers working as part of a collaborative team for participants. And whether that's me working with you as a support coordinator myself, you know, providers under the core supports or the, you know, capacity building, we all need to be on the same page and we all need to be working together so that we can optimize the plan that does come up for people. And there's an extensive amount of work that goes into the creation of plans and the provision of evidence that will support plans to be built. So that's a whole nother 50 webinars to talk about that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We do need to get it right. So that's the state of the nation at the moment. We all know with the NDIS, there are a lot of changes that are happening and continue to happen. So I would say that the information that I'm presenting today is current today. That's all I'll say about that. Okay, so then there are the plans are actually funded. So plans can be funded in 4 different ways. And I'm not sure if you've heard of this language before, so I am going to keep it relatively straightforward. So plans can be funded in 4 different ways. They can be agency managed, or you'll see on a plan that it says under a particular funding category NDIA managed. That means that those supports, or the support from that bucket of money, must be provided by a registered provider. Okay, and that's a whole nother thing that we'll talk about a little bit later, but we won't go too much into. Plan managed, these are the 2 or the 3 that you're going to be most interested in today, I expect. So plan managed is basically, if you think about the finance industry, and we have brokers, so they're like a broker in the NDIS space. They, just ignore that. That's LACs. Never mind me. Plan managers are very much around paying bills, keeping invoices, making sure that things that are being claimed are appropriate within each of the categories, managing those sorts of things for you. When people have plan managed within their NDIS plan, they can use a registered or non-registered provider. Okay, very, very clear, and it's exactly the same for self-managed. Okay, so if you are not a registered provider, you can still provide supports under plan managed plans and self-managed plans. Okay, so basically, as a provider providing services to plan managed participants, you will send your invoices either to the participant or directly to the plan manager, okay? And they will pay your invoices. And we'll go through a little bit about invoices a little bit later. Self-managed is really quite unique. Self-managed, like I said, you can provide services to them. They're registered, they can use registered or non-registered providers. And the pricing here needs to fall within reasonable and necessary criteria. So their pricing can be negotiable, whereas someone who's providing plan managed services, they need to stick within the underneath the pricing guidelines. So we're going to have a little look at that later. There are some ways that we can get around that, but from an NDIS perspective, if you are providing an invoice and your prices are over and above what the NDIS recommends as its top pricing, then the person or the participant can choose to pay that gap, but the NDIS will not pay it. It cannot also be paid by someone like your health insurance or Medicare. Okay, so there are some big considerations that we'll talk about a little later. With self-managed participants, they have a huge amount of flexibility and will want to negotiate prices with you, as will plan managed participants, but particularly self-managed participants. They pay the bills themselves, the invoice goes directly to them, and they are fully responsible for keeping all of their records. And some plans have a mixture of all of them. There are a couple of areas within the NDIS, like behaviour supports, where mostly those buckets of money will be agency managed. So it can come in all shapes and sizes plans. Do we have any questions there, Wendy, before I move on?
There's lots of comments and things like that. So people are commenting about their experience with NDIS and then about different providers. On this particular plan management, I don't know that we have specific questions, Cassie, but people are more asking about, well, if I'm offering this, like short-term accommodation, where would that be covered?
Right.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Would you like to collect some of those and we can talk about them at the end, and we can go back to those buckets if you like?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I'd encourage people to put into the question chat box, if you've something specific that you want to know, okay, how is it best to frame this up? I've got this potential service or program or experience, you know, or transport or daily living or, you know, wine tour experience, whatever it might be. If you can post it into the question chat box, see if we can get to as many of those, and Cassie can give, I guess we're into the mechanics now of, you know, what's the service provision and how does the funding kind of work. And I know that you're going to touch on the pricing, but I think there probably was a bit of an assumption from some people that we, you know, they had to fit within the pricing sort of guidelines and there wasn't much room there. But it's great to know that there is, you know, room all round to negotiate this.
Yeah, yeah. So just in relation to that question, very quick answer, core supports, and we can talk more about that later. So
Cassie, just before you go on, there is a bit of a theme about how can people find clients. So you might want to think about this later.
Yeah.
But one of the things is that some people might be offering stuff already, but maybe they're not hooked into the networks or knowing how to tap into people that might be self-managed or plan managed or whatever, and they might be struggling to find clients. So maybe you can touch on that later.
Oh yeah, we've got a whole slide for that. Just coming up right now. So I don't, you know, I'm not here to coach you on your business, but I do want to give you some tips on how you can, I guess, get started and get your best foot forward, rather than going around in circles like I did for quite some time. So, you know, really getting clear on your purpose. It sounds like a lot of you already are, which is absolutely fantastic. But in this space, I guess what I'm referring to is getting clear on who your target market is and how you want to serve them. We see very, very often that providers come in and they want to provide every service, and it does kind of muddy the waters. There's opportunities for conflict of interest there, and participants aren't actually really clear then on what it is that you are providing, because there's so much. And so I would just I guess urge you to consider specializing, offering one or two things and doing them extremely well. It will serve you well. Get your experience within the scheme and the sector, and then potentially grow from there when you do have, I guess, stronger contacts and relationships within the sector. So do your market research. Talk to people and businesses that are currently operating. Don't be shy. You know, if you don't ask, you don't get. And so I think one of the best things that served me really, really well was just being open and vulnerable and putting myself out there and offering, I guess, support and comments and I guess my whole self without any expectation of anything in return. And I think that that's really important, and we'll sort of touch on that a little bit more in a second. But getting to know people's challenges, okay? So this is actually, you know, our businesses are actually so much bigger than us. It's actually not about us. It's about what the challenges are for potential participants and how you might be able to solve their problems. So really getting to know and understand who the participants are on the NDIS, what perhaps the gaps in the market are and how you might be able to fill them in a really creative and innovative way is going to serve you really well. And there are NDIS quarterly reports that come out on the NDIS in the news section of the NDIS website. And what I love about them is that you can actually drill right down to your local government area and looking at particular data, such as how many participants of a particular age with a particular disability have got X amount of funding or what have you. So it's really interesting information, and I would encourage you to check that out. And understand, yes.
I was going to say, oh, do you want to finish your point and then we'll just go to a couple of questions?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to say understanding where we fit in the scheme and where you can add the most value, but that's going to come with time, obviously. So go ahead, ask the question.
Yeah, it kind of actually beautifully fits in with this question about work out where you are. So, and I can also recall some of the conversations that we had leading up to this webinar where we were talking about, is it better to niche and specialise or offer everything? And I remember even like a body language thing that you had as a reaction to that, kind of going, well, can you really be, you know, expert at everything that you offer? So there's a bit of a question about niching specifically, like is that important? Yeah. And obviously you and your team are in a position to refer you know, clients to providers. So are there some things that you just kind of like avoid, and are there some things that you really look for?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm happy to answer that question. I can't give specific advice about offering all of the things or not, but I think to begin with, niching has served us extremely well, and what it has done is provided us with the opportunity to provide a service that exceeds our customer expectations, and what that has done is filtered out to word of mouth marketing and reputation within the NDIS space, but also within the state, as far as, you know, we get referrals from the health sector, from child protection, we get referrals from the Office of the Public Advocate and places like that. And that is because we've gotten very, very clear on our values and our purpose and how we want to provide services to people. And it doesn't mean that you can't expand from there, but what I'm saying is this, if you concentrate on one or two or maybe three services and get them absolutely spot on first, and then look at opportunity after that. That's my personal thoughts, but not everybody does it. And to answer your question, Wendy, yes, occasionally we do cringe when we see a brand new organisation who are offering all of the things. They're offering support coordination, and then they're offering plan management, and they're offering all of the allied health, and they're offering day options, and they're offering social and community support, and they're offering SLES, which supports young people leaving school and going into further education or into employment, you know, and they can do all the things. They're brand new and they employ maybe 3 or 4 people, and maybe not. And that to me tells me that they're a little bit more opportunistic, if you like, if I can be a little bit cheeky there. And, you know, from my perspective, we're support coordinators. We are one of the people that you will want to know and that you will want to build relationships with. And if you're not clear and we can't see where your values at, where you're going to be able to, with the way in which you approach your business, and if you're clear or not, we're not really going to be able to understand or know who you are and what you've got to offer. And so how can we then, you know, market you to our clients?
Yeah. Now, Cassie, I'm just keeping an eye on the time. It's 7:36.
Yes.
Just Adelaide time. But there's just sort of a question. I'm going to chunk it up. And it's basically more about experiences and packages, right? So Jessica James does cooking classes for kids, learning experiences, fun and social skills. She's got a number of NDIS clients, but she wants to know that what can she do in terms of more of that and helping kiddies. That's what her language. Sandra's got packages around decluttering, hoarding, squalor, touching social services. Amanda's got experiences that are related to recovery with the tourism slant, and Louisa's got experiences related to day retreats around wellness, which could be for NDIS participants or carers. So just thinking about that experience perspective, which could be packages and services as well, have you got any advice as to how they can position that to be attractive to NDIS clients, plan managers, local area coordinators, other people that would make referrals to them?
Yeah, well, one, I'd get extremely familiar with the pricing arrangements document, because you're probably going to know a little bit more about where you fit there. What I would encourage you to do is be really open and honest and come and talk to someone like us, who are support coordinators, because we are generally out of the box thinkers. Well, certainly my organisation is anyway, and we can workshop ideas with you and ways in which you might be able to offer those services or package them up. Generally, unfortunately, the NDIS in most instances will have a pricing per hour for a lot of services, so that can get a little bit complex, but there are ways and means as well. We have on many occasions gone to organisations and said, hey, can you offer this in this way with this included, but take out a little bit of that, and they have been able to shape their services. So I guess your imagination is the limit, but it's getting the right team around you to workshop those things. And maybe I'll put up a bit of an offer or something. We can have a few focus groups or something like that, where we can actually either do some online or in the office, in my office, brainstorming about how some providers can package up some of their deals, if that's something that they would like. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good. Obviously, you know, people would love to have your insight and feedback. So
yeah,
I know that you've got an office down south, so we might need to do something
Yep.
online, and we've got people from all around Australia and internationally too. So we might need a couple of different options. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's exciting stuff. I love that stuff. So absolutely, let's get into that. So I'm sure that you've all had a look at this. I don't need to go into too much detail, but one thing that I do want to share is about being visible, and I expect that Wendy would be cheering on the inside here. You know, are you hanging out where your peers and potential clients are? So are you on Facebook, and are you in Facebook groups? Do you have your own Facebook presence? Are you on LinkedIn or other social media mediums? You need to be visible, and that doesn't mean being a little bit of a dirty spammer and sending unsolicited, you know, PMs to people or anything like that. But it's about really connecting. It's about getting curious and really listening when, you know, people are asking questions or when they're sharing information, really listening and honing in on what it is they might have a problem with, or you know, where there's opportunity. And obviously that gives a great opportunity to establish some organic relationships. So I would really have you consider where you're hanging out. For a very long time, I wasn't hanging out anywhere where my audience was. Nowhere. I was hanging out in business groups where there were no other people like me. No one was offering anything that I was interested in, and I was having a really hard time connecting, and kind of the penny dropped. And so LinkedIn, if you're looking for professional, you know, I guess, relationships, but certainly Facebook and Facebook groups in this space are really key. So I would caution that though. When you are in a Facebook group, there is a lot of information that's shared that is incorrect. So just be warned and be careful. But, you know, places like NDIS grassroots, there's a lot of participants in there sharing a lot, and it's a very vulnerable space, so you do need to be careful there. But then there are, you know, NDIS provider groups, or NDIS groups in general, for each state, and then there might be some for each, say, council area or in particular, you know, there's carers and there's all sorts on there. So have a look and get really curious. When you start sharing organically about how you might be able to help someone solve a problem, or have you tried this, or have you thought of that, people start recognizing you, right? And that's where the connections come from. So yeah, do you have a website? Do you have a Facebook page? Do you have a Facebook group? And do you have a LinkedIn profile? You know, the first thing that I do is if I've heard about a new organisation, I go to their Facebook page, I go to their website, and I go to their services. Okay, straight up every time.
Cass, I think this is really important too, because when you do look at these sorts of things, you see whether or not people are focused on themselves too much or on their clients. You know, so you can tell by the imagery, the language, you know, the way that you might be speaking about yourself. If you are I, me, my, we, our, us, if you're promoting yourself, it's a complete turn off. So that's something, you know, that we say across the board in business, but in this area in particular, like your clients have to be number one, don't they?
Yep, absolutely. Tracy's just put a question in there. Can we have a chat about that, Wendy, at the end, please, just in regard to carers?
Yes, I wrote that down, asterisk that as well, so that'll be good.
Great. Okay, so key people that you need to know. This is where it gets really interesting. So you need to know people like me, support coordinators, specialist support coordinators, recovery coaches as well. We are like the master connectors, okay? So if you want to know, so if you want to connect with us, please don't spam my inbox. It's not cool. I probably won't reply. You know, years ago I would have. However, I get so many inboxes, and I'd love an organic, you know, connection and conversation. So do know who support coordinators are. Ask if they're interested in catching up with you, or if you can send them some information. And when you do send that information, I do want to know about what services that you're providing, but I want to know who you are, why you're contacting me, why you want to support people, what's driving you, and what is your approach. Okay, so if you send me something that is just a bit of a flyer, or here's my website, can we have a coffee? I'm not going to connect with you, and this is all about connection, right? So in particular support coordinators, that's how we like to be contacted, and we get very excited when we find innovative providers. And I'm going to tell you now that I have booked out so many providers, it's not funny, from word of mouth. And it's basically, if you're a great operator, you have a great reputation, and you've got some really meaningful positive outcomes with our clients, you will be booked out, no doubt. Okay, and I share organically. I don't ever get paid to share a great organization. I don't have a problem. I love sharing about organizations and people who make a real difference. Okay, plan managers, you definitely want to know and have them familiar with you as well. And sometimes providers can feel that it's quite difficult to work with plan managers, but I think if you always lead with kindness and the intention of building a relationship and working together, because we're all here for the same reason and the same outcomes, I think that you're going to be able to build a much more effective relationship with plan managers, and they will remember you. Okay, not everybody has support coordination. Okay, not everybody has support coordination. So plan managers literally deal with hundreds and thousands of people every day. And when they get a call from somebody who doesn't have support coordination in their budget, and they say, hey, I'm looking for respite here, or hey, I'm looking for a great occupational therapist who specializes in, and they've got you at the forefront of the mind, guess who they're going to recommend? Okay, so that's just really important. Local area coordinators are very much the same. So a local area coordinator is like a broker. I'm sorry, going back to the beginning. So local area coordinators are like a middle person for the NDIS. They are supposed to connect with their local community. They support people, participants, to go through their planning process. They hand up proposed plans to the NDIS. The plan comes back, gets approved. Then they implement or unpack the plan with a participant, and the participant again might not have support coordination. So that local area coordinator is able to share different information about providers in their local area. So get into their offices, share your your pamphlets and your brochures and that sort of thing, and do make connection with them, because again, it's that visibility as well. So NDIS planners are a level above, and it's a little bit more difficult to be able to build a relationship with them. But these three here are pretty important and could make a really big difference to your business success. Now, so how do you find a local area coordinator? So, sorry, Wendy, did you have a question?
Yes, just had a quick question. So, clearly these networks are absolutely key, and people might need to develop a database of these or get someone to do that database. But how do you kind of find these people? Is it a matter of you can search and find it on Google, on websites? Do you need to, amp up your LinkedIn kind of thing? Like, how do you actually find who these people are?
Definitely a good one is LinkedIn. You could Google support coordination near me. Local area coordinators, you can actually find them on the NDIS website. There's a list of local area coordinators. You can actually, there's a search function that you can put your postcode in, and it will actually list your local area coordinator near you. And they're basically partners in the community. They're referred to partners in community. So for where I am, we have Mission Australia. I know that other parts of South Australia have BAPT Care. Some have Feros Care. So there are different partners in the community. And so just a quick search on the NDIS website or Google NDIS local area coordinator, you'll probably get straight to that link. Wendy, if you remind me at the end, I can link add that into my the links that I send afterwards.
Yeah, awesome, Cass. And we've got about 10 minutes to go. So
yeah, so let's fly through. Okay, provider need to knows. Okay, so as a provider, you do not need full access to a plan, and as a support coordinator, I would never ever recommend my participants to ever share their full plan. It's like looking into their bank account. That is private information. If they choose to share it with you, please be respectful of that, and please don't be opportunistic. Look at all the money and go, hey, and we can offer you this and this and this and this and this, and all your plan's gone. Okay, so you do not necessarily get access or have rights to access the full plan. Generally, you can access the About Me section and the goals. Okay, so everybody has goals in their plan, and it is really important that you know what those goals are for that person and if they're appropriate. Okay, we're going to talk about service agreements and contracts a little bit later, but I guess we might just focus on it right now. Whether you're a registered provider or not, and whether you want to do a service agreement or not, I cannot recommend highly enough how important service agreements are for both the provider and the consumer. A service agreement is essentially a contract of service between the two parties, okay? And you need to get very, very clear on what is in that service agreement, and that really needs to include some key policies, what your responsibilities are, what the responsibilities of the participant are, where they can go if they have complaints, what the cost of services are, an agreement on what services will be provided, how many hours and by when. You know, all of that key information is absolutely critical. So again, service agreements, if there is no service agreement between the two parties, it can cause all sorts of legal dramas down the track. Okay, so have a service agreement. So yeah, like I said, agreed services, be very, very clear. Everything should be in writing. We're, I guess, dealing with extraordinarily vulnerable people. Sometimes people don't remember things, sometimes you don't remember things. And if things are in writing, then it makes it much, much easier for everybody. You may need to create an easy read document. Okay, there are service agreement templates to follow online. Yes, absolutely. The NDIS has one on their website. As a provider, whether you are registered or not, you are bound by the NDIS Code of Conduct. I can't be clear enough about that, and you will get a link to that. That is on the NDIS Commission website, ndiscommission.gov.au/providers, and you'll find it there. That site you need to be aware of, because you also have a responsibility to still report incidents that have potentially occurred with participants while they're on your watch, basically. Okay. You need to keep records and you know, just as any good business would, you need to keep really great notes and make sure your internal systems are robust. That's probably one of the biggest things that, you know, I had to learn the hard way. And so whilst you might not think that you're going to need systems, you just don't know if you're going to grow. Keeping good case notes about what's happened in certain settings, when you're having one-on-ones with particular clients, if there are concerns that you might have, logging that and keeping notes of that. You just can't keep everything in your head, so it's critical that you do. And what those good notes will do is feed into progress reports that you may be required to do. Okay, so that's a whole nother session that we just can't talk about today, but you need to be aware that you may have a requirement to provide progress reports, and those progress reports are against the goals and need to contain information about clearly progress, barriers, what outcomes there are, and next steps. Okay, so outcomes there were during your time with that person and potential next steps. And there's going to be recommendations in there and a whole range of things depending on what you provide. But you do need to be aware of that. And you still do have, like I said, incident reporting responsibilities. So do get onto the NDIS Commission website and check that out. So provider need to knows. You know, pricing considerations are going to vary between a sole trader and a business. And I've got some information over the page. So, you know, I guess where I'm getting to here is that you can have a look at the pricing arrangements document, which is what was called the price guide. NDIS like to change things a lot, so they've changed the name of it. So the old price guide, pricing arrangements document, there is so much information in those documents, and they will list the maximum that you can charge for a service, and they'll list the line item number and all of those sorts of things. That doesn't mean that as a business coming in that you need to charge at that level. Okay, so there are so many considerations that go into how they come up with a particular pricing point, and I'm going to show you that in a second. So just think about your overheads and your cost of business and your level of experience and how you're going to come up with your prices. And particularly for plan and agency managed, you're actually you can charge over a price guide, recommended price guide amount. However, your participant will have to pay that gap, and I don't see that very often. Okay, so you may actually price yourself out of the market. Okay, so you're not obliged to charge at the highest rate. In fact, if you're coming in relatively new, I would probably price a little bit under. That's probably actually going to work in your favor, because participants will probably be like, oh, wow, that's excellent. I get more bang for my buck. I can get more support. Then they're going to talk about you. Okay, so, you know, it's something that you do need to consider. You also need to consider travel and travel charges and non-face-to-face time. We can't talk about that at the moment, but I'm going to actually flick over because I've got the, no,
yeah. And Cassie, so we've got 1 minute, so I know that we might.
Okay, oh my God. Okay, so we're going to flick through here.
We might need to finish on this slide and then quickly take that question from Tracy.
All right. There's a lot of information in my slides that you will get anyway. We'll talk about invoices there and everything that you need to have on your invoices. You have compliance obligations as well. I have them all listed here for you. Okay, your worker screening check is extremely important. Worker orientation module. Every single person who works in the NDIS space has to have undertaken this. Everyone, whether you're registered or not. Okay. Do you need to be a registered provider? Absolutely not. You don't have to be a registered provider. If you do, there are 2 ways to go through it: verification and certification. Okay, that's another webinar. There you go. How was that, Wendy?
You did very well. So now we have that question that we wanted to get back to from Tracy, where she's coming from a carer's perspective.
Yep.
She's saying, look, you know, there's lots around education, but what about respite or self-care? And I would imagine there's lots of people online that are also thinking about self-care and respite for participants, but also for carers. So how could that be shaped up, do you think?
Yeah, look, in a very creative way. You know, years gone by, respite was an extremely dirty word in the NDIS space. It's not so now. It's about how it's framed to the NDIS. There are sections within people's plans around parent carer training, and you just need to remember that the focus of the NDIS is about independence and social and community participation. Part of the NDIS Act and the rules actually talk about parents and carers being able to have the ability to participate in economic activities. And so you know, there are ways that we can fund respite for parents and carers, and I'd love to have a direct conversation with you, or I'm happy to host another, just an open forum chat about how we can look at that in the future specific to your situation. Okay.
I'll just double check and see.
Share that.
Basically what's going to happen, Jackie and others, in terms of some of the tools and templates and the links. People are asking about service agreements, for example, Cassie. So Cassie will send out, or I'll send out a link to the recording, and then there'll be a bunch of resources and links and things like that in it. The open forum chat seems like something that people are really kind of interested in.
Yeah, okay.
And I appreciate that there's a lot more that Cassie has got to share. I wanted to also say thank you to you, Cassie. I know that you've had some things happen this week around some clients, which have been very sad. You've been supporting a lot of people. Also, you know, your own family. So I really appreciate your time. And everybody, let's give Cassie a virtual round of applause and say thank you in the question chat box.
Thank you. I could talk forever, so I'm so sorry for having to rush through at the end. But like I said, you can have a look at the slides there. There is actually a lot of information in those slides. So it's my absolute pleasure, and thank you for helping me.
Yeah, and Cassie, people have said wonderful presentation. They really appreciate it. Obviously, you're an absolute wealth of knowledge, and not everybody is as open as you are with sharing these sorts of things. I know that people will follow up with you, but they won't be naff in terms of their direct messaging or their email or their sales pitch. They'll be
spamming.
And let's see if there's some suggestions you've got about other sessions you'd like or more questions that you have. Thanks everybody for joining us, and you have a lovely evening in SA last night of lockdown, good, bad or otherwise. And thanks Cassie, really appreciate your time and expertise.
Thank you. Happy out of lockdown, guys, for those who are.
Thanks everyone, see you later.